Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Cash Forecasting Accuracy, the How and the Why of AP, AR, and Exogenous Market Dynamics. I would like to thank our webinar partner today, HighRadius, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible. I also appreciate their commitment to serving the Treasury and finance professions. Speaking of HighRadius, I'm honored and humbled to have with me today my esteemed co-speaker, Tracy Ferguson Knight. She's Director of Solution Engineering at HighRadius. So Tracy, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit about your background before we get going here. And welcome to the webinar, Tracy. Always a pleasure.
All right, thank you, Ernie. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be speaking with you today. As he said, I'm Tracy Ferguson Knight, Director of Solutions Engineering here at HighRadius. I've been in the Treasury space for many years. I almost hesitate to say how many years now, about 20 years on the Treasury Management System vendor side, and then before that, a practitioner myself. I'm excited to be here at HighRadius now, where I've been for about 16 months, really focused on AI and cash forecasting. We finally got some great new innovations in the cash forecasting area. So I'm very excited to be here.
All
Thank you,
right.
Ernie.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Just a few words about Treasury webinars. Our webinars are designed to empower Treasury, AP, and AR success at companies of all sizes across all countries. We only do what we do best, which is virtual events. A few housekeeping items. Any of you out there interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions, stay on for the duration of the webinar, and answer this short survey that will launch at the end of the webinar today. If you have any questions regarding CTP credits, please send an email to ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Again, that's ernie@treasurywebinars.com. I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering our post-webinar survey. It'll launch immediately after the webinar is over, and I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to fill out the survey because we're always trying to improve the ROI. We often our event attendees for their valuable time. We always want to be better. There's a lot of webinars out there, and I know mine are unique, but I'm always trying to get better. I just did a little survey on LinkedIn about what people want to see more of, and by far, the answer was engaging hosts and engaging speakers. And so I'm glad that I have Tracy here to help me on the engaging speaker side. Again, those housekeeping items, again, ernie@treasurywebinars.com. CTP people, be patient. I'm only one person. I do my best on that front, so don't worry. If you qualify, you're going to get it. So now I'm going to show how well I know HighRadius. Before we dive in, I really want to do a little background about our sponsor, HighRadius. They've been a strategic partner of mine for probably the last 5 or 6 years. Really always on the forefront, right, of AI and cloud solutions. So when I started with them, they were really focused in the accounts receivable space. And then as that space started to evolve, they really had the foresight, and I hope I pushed just a little bit to see that really a huge need in the AI space was cash forecasting and cash management also, but cash forecasting, we hadn't seen anything change in 10 years. And so I've been honored, to help on that front, educate everyone. Also, their partners are off the charts, right? Bank of America, PNC, Citi. So really, they've continued to develop not only on the functionality side, but also in terms of thought leadership and treasury. They've been around, a few years, and they're doing awesome. But if you go to their website, just tremendous thought leadership, communities, and also they're trusted by 200 plus Fortune 1000 companies. So I'm not going to give you the HighRadius commercial. Hopefully I did okay with that, Treasury, Tracy. But I mean, their commitment to thought leadership, is second to none. So we appreciate their support. So let's talk about what our learning objectives are today. I think I got these embedded in me from AFP, right? So what are you going to get out? You're going to understand the key lessons learned from 2020. So Tracy and I will take a quick peek at that. I mean, I think it was hard and we're still learning, but I think it's really important that as we get back to the office, some of us aren't there yet. Most of us aren't there yet. There were some great things that we learned. We want you to be able to identify your cash forecasting variance drivers, and that's much easier said than done. So I really haven't seen a webinar focused on your variance drivers and how to understand them. Those are incredibly important, and that's really how you get your value out of those. And that's where AI can just be tremendous. A lot of times it's about identifying the drivers, right? But it's also about managing them and validating them. And I think this is where AI is really interesting. And I was at a conference I think it was last year, Tracy, already, that we were at Radiance, and I was asking someone, they had a virtual assistant. I said, hey, can I say, hey, what's driving my cash forecasting variance, and will the AI assistant tell me? And they're like, yeah, that's coming soon. And I was like, wow, I can't tell you how long it took me to do that, right, back in the day. So that's exciting. And then kind of my favorite part as a practitioner, HighRadius has put together some great content around the value of cash forecasting automation, so how you can quantify that. So I think that's incredibly important as well. What's our agenda? And I think we're all aware, but I think in case you're not the CFO, cash forecasting is king. So let's talk about why, and let's talk about how we take advantage of that opportunity. We'll talk about how to demystify your forecast accuracy. We'll talk about your variance drivers and your value of AP automation. So we've made some big promises here, but I'm sure Tracy will help me do that. So in terms of lessons learned, again, I think these things are just important. I think we should endeavor to do these all. For me, I like center, right? Communication, more communication is always better. Engagement, so I think we need to be innovative there, but I think we've been forced to be creative, and we need to take that, right, and use it and not forget, and realize that creativity and engagement are muscles we need to really, some people need some help, right? It's like working out. Networking, right? I think we all realize we do well to embrace or re-embrace the concept of online community. Technology, right? I think it's been good to see technology adoption has actually gone up, right, in many instances, and I think that's because we've gotten a seat at the table. Experimentation and innovation, and then realignment. This is probably my most important thing that I preach on. You want to align on your expectations more than once a year, right? Whether it's your staff, your colleagues, your customers, your partners. It's good to continue to keep any relationship right on track. Tracy, any of those things really stick out to you, or anything you want to add on key lessons learned that you've learned and also bring to clients?
Yeah, Ernie, I actually think it would probably be the fourth and fifth one, the technology as well as the
Yeah.
experimentation and innovation. From a technology perspective, I think we've all seen that doing things the old manual way just doesn't transfer well. It's not a good way to manage things when it comes to disaster recovery.
Right.
And that you can get just more efficiency and benefit out of all operations utilizing even some pretty basic technologies, and that those were very helpful for those companies that already had them in place when we all began working from home. And then finally, the experimentation and innovation. This caused us all to rethink a wide variety of the things that we do and the work processes we have in place. And so the good thing that has come out of something that's been, pretty miserable is that companies have been forced to rethink why they do so many of the things they do and say, is that still working or do we need to change it? And every time you're forced to do that, to really think about the whys and hows of what you do, good things can result. It's a great chance to begin to transform your business. And there's been a lot of that this year, or I
Thanks.
guess 2020.
Yeah, and go ahead now, right? Go that great. You just said my favorite word for 2021, the why. And we'll talk about that when we get to cash forecast. And people need to focus on the why. And I think like you said, it's made us focus on the why. Just some of the things that I've seen from my company and also from HighRadius. We've had I've seen, I think HighRadius did virtual cooking shows. I've seen virtual wine tasting. My company used to send me gift cards, right, for business, for lunches. And so there's a lot of ways to do it. There's trivia, there's games. And so I think it's really been good for us on that front. So kudos to you that have done that. If you want some ideas, we're always here to help. So let's talk cash forecasting is king. I think it's really important that we look at, right, what we're doing in treasury with the CFO and the C-suite is for us. There's not that many times that we get to come up to the plate. We have to be ready, right? We have to be ready for the fastball. And I think a lot of us might have taken a few fastballs to the head last year from COVID and the expectations changed. But you look at Have they changed, right? Revenue projection, cash liquidity management, right, and supplier risk management, all things that are right in our wheelhouse, right? And so it's not going away. So it was good to me to see that cash and liquidity management is absolutely there. So again, this is just in the CFO's mind. Cash forecasting is king. So now you have the CFO's ear. What are you going to do with it? I worked on a survey last year with APQC. Ask companies how they measure treasury success. Guess what? Cash forecasting accuracy was the #1 measure of success. Now, for me, I think cash conversion cycle is really what we need to look at. But again, it just shows how important that is, right? How do you communicate your value? I don't think it's cash forecasting accuracy, but if that's what your company wants. And so I think this just shows, right? Cash forecasting is king. Anything on this graph here, Tracy, really stick out to you that you might want to share with us? Comments?
As I look at it, I'm of course not surprised that cash
Yeah.
forecasting is actually #1. It's been a high priority for a long time and certainly can drive so many of the things that Treasury is able to control and can help in increasing interest income or decreasing interest expense. So there's very tangible benefits that you can get from having an accurate cash forecast. I guess the thing that surprises me most, and I think it even ties in with what you said, that thinking about cash conversion cycle is most important, is that in Treasury, there are so many things that impact cash that Treasury does not have direct control over. And so for those companies where you have a real Treasury department, oftentimes AR and AP, they're not under the same department. They're not even under the treasurer. They roll up under the CFO. And that difference, that kind of split between these departments, and yet AR and AP, of course, have a significant impact on cash and, of course, cash forecasting, that I'm not surprised that these are what companies are saying they're measuring their success by. But from a treasury perspective, it's often hard to control these things when they are not your direct responsibility. So I think communication is key.
Oh, thank you so much. And that was a perfect segue, because in this survey, we actually asked the question, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, possibly, is what level of control do you have? And so when I'm telling people, okay, this impacts my success, you want to look at it, right? Do you have control? Do you have indirect control? Do you have influence, or do you have no influence? And so you're absolutely right. What you want to do is you want to make sure, if you can't get that indirect control, you want to have that influence, but you also want to see if you can show people mutually beneficial, right? And that accountability across departments is really key. So let's talk about demystifying your cash forecasting. Just some benchmarks from the same survey. Again, where you stand depends on where you sit, but it's just interesting to see the frequency, right, that we saw last year. We're probably going to do the survey again this year. Most people doing it on a monthly basis, weekly basis, 18%, and then the time horizons, right? I was kind of surprised the time horizons were this far out. I would imagine, and I believe that we did this. I think it was probably before COVID really hit. I think it was maybe in the beginning of Q2 of last year. I think Craig at Strategic Treasurer has done some more recent research, so we'll take a look at that as that comes available. And then cash forecasting accuracy. I guess it depends what you're trying to forecast, right? Whether it's going to impact the decision, but you still see, right, that there's still a lot of room for improvement. 75 to 90%. I mean, 75% or above, we only have 43%. If you're 25 to 49%, to me, I really don't know what good that does you. So you want to look at the ROI, but you have to look, the ROI is this improving my decision? And then what's the impact? And so Tracy will walk us through that. Again, anything here, Tracy, that sticks out to you, or maybe that you want to comment on things that you're seeing in terms of cash forecasting, in terms of frequency and maybe accuracy?
I think we saw that frequency definitely increased this
Okay.
past year. There are many companies that weren't doing it much at all that started. Those that were already doing it um, gained a more frequent kind of frequency or cadence for forecasting and reforecasting. And then in terms of the duration of their forecast, just because it says they go 2 or 3 or more months out doesn't mean it's accurate. And what I hear most often from companies that do it in a very manual fashion with Excel, and just utilizing maybe a little bit of historical data, find that they might forecast out as far as they want to, but that they can't depend on it. I hear too many companies say, pretty much our forecast, we could put it in the trash and still come up with the same degree of accuracy, that they have no confidence in it. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement in this area.
All right, great. So let me go ahead and it's harder than this for me to turn the floor over to anyone. Tracy, let me turn the floor over to you, so you can take the wheel for a while and start driving us through right, navigating us through the drivers of forecast accuracy.
Say pun intended.
That's
Well,
right.
I think there's 4 key things you look at when you're thinking about the accuracy. Um, First, what approach are you taking to doing your forecast? Are you doing it from a bottom-up approach, meaning that are you forecasting at the lowest level possible by company or entity, as opposed to doing it kind of from a headquarters level and creating one big global forecast where when you have variances, you have an inability to drill into the details to really see where those variances are coming from. And so doing it at the lowest level possible that you can do in an efficient manner should be the desired goal. You'll have the greatest ability to actually analyze your forecast and to draw some conclusions from it and make improvements to it. 2, data gathering. Finding ways to pull in data efficiently, automatically, has got to be the goal. Getting data straight from the source as opposed to from a person who puts their spin on the numbers and then reports it to you. 3, the type of modeling that you're using. Sometimes companies get pretty sophisticated with their modeling, and that's great, but are they applying it to the right areas? If you put too much effort into categories that are relatively simple to forecast and not enough effort into categories that are difficult to forecast, you're probably not getting the right results. For example, most companies, payroll is every other week, probably doesn't vary that much. So just do that. There's no reason to put some sophisticated modeling around something that's simple. And then finally, to drive accuracy, you've got to be looking at your variances. That has to happen. If you don't understand what's wrong, how are you going to pinpoint where to improve it? So let's look at these a little bit more. First, a bottoms-up approach. Build that forecast at the lowest level possible. So pull in information by, sometimes it's country or currency. Most often it's going to be entity or maybe company code directly from the source. 2, data gathering. When you look at where you're getting your data from and how you're doing it, it's important that it be automated. So you should be pulling in your bank data automatically. You should be gathering information from the ERPs automatically, pulling in what is the outstanding or the new AR or AP or maybe payroll numbers or other categories. Getting them straight from the source is key. The next slide shows that you really got to be looking at these categories, thinking about the key ones and not over engineering it. Sometimes I see a cash forecast that's at a very detailed level, almost equivalent to FP&A. Tell me why you need to know and have AP split into 20 different categories of AP in your cash forecast. Does it change any decision that you make? Does it change anything that you do? Chances are it doesn't. There's no need to forecast at a lower level in terms of categories than is truly required. And then finally, variance analysis. You have to be comparing forecast versus actual. Now, in a manual environment, chances are you're only doing it for one duration. Some companies maybe look at their 1 week forecast versus actuals. Many companies literally are only looking at their 1 day forecast versus actual, really more their cash position. But ideally, what you do is you're looking at your forecast versus actual for your 30-day forecast, maybe for your 60 or your 90-day forecast, so that you understand what degree of confidence you should have in your forecast at various points in time, so that when your CFO is asking you for some quarter-ending cash numbers, you can say how confident you feel about that. That's what technology can help you do. It's pretty hard to do that in a manual environment, very time consuming. Understanding your forecast by line item and time periods, all of that is important so you can improve your forecast. And as that final line says, rinse and repeat. You keep reforecasting over and over again. So it brings us to our first poll question. And how do you answer this? We understand the reasons for our forecast variances. Can you say confidently that you do? Please answer this poll now.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I just want to remind everyone, if you're interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you will have to answer all of our polling questions. We appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. In order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up another 15 or 20 seconds here. Then if there's something interesting, we'll take a quick peek at the results, if nothing else, just to kind of see where the audience is at. And remember, perception is reality in some cases, but you want to make sure that you don't pat yourself on the back too much, right? But you also want to make sure that you're balanced. And so back it up with data, just as Tracy has already mentioned very well many times. It's all about impacting decisions. And so you have to look at the cost benefits, right? Do I need to be 99% accurate every day on my AP forecast? Probably not, right? Is that going to impact your decision? Probably not. And so you need to look at the ROI. So let me go ahead and close the polling question. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek here. Oh, we have good. We have strongly agree, 47%. So we have 68% at least agree, 26% are neutral. Maybe they're not quite there yet. And so I think really what speaks to me here is that we have some room for improvement, right? I guess at the end of the day, we all want to be and strongly agree. And as we go through this, we'll show you that in my mind, and only through technology and empowering, right, these best practices, you're going to be able to make your journey to strongly agree. So let's go ahead and move forward. As always, we have action-packed webinar for you. So let's take a look at the typical forecast categories and kind of look at, what's the biggest drivers of variance. High Radius did a survey last year, and so what the survey found was accounts receivable, right? 57%. They really identified that. 20% was AP. 10% operating cash flows, others, and Capex. And you can say, well, part of it depends on, right, your industry, your flows. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, part of that depends on your communication. And so for me, where I used to get smacked when I was doing my forecast and planning investments and FX trades was Capex and non-operating cash flows and the others, right? I didn't know what was coming. And so I needed to communicate to everyone that I need to know what's coming. I'm going to tell you my story. We were building a big plant in Mexico. We told the plant manager 100 times he needed to negotiate the contract in dollars. Well, what happens? Oh, we have a payment tomorrow. It was like $3 million US, but he made the contract in pesos, right? And so that was a big kind of smack in the face for me on, on the FX side of it. So I didn't forecast that I needed, right, to buy some pesos. And so that hurt the company. And so let's go ahead. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive here into the categories. And so, let's talk about AR. And so I think that all of us have seen this kind of explode on us, and this is obviously tremendously important in some of the things that are causing unpredictability, right? And these are things that depend on your business, but these are things that you can measure, right? Seasonal trends. I used to work at a submersible motor company, and every time there was it was dry in Texas, we had to take that into account. So there was a shifter there. Obviously, the business cycle. What about payment behaviors, right? It can be the credit score. Some of your disputes, right? If things are in dispute, they're not going to get paid. And then, of course, our favorite, discount and rebates. I think as I talk, you're probably thinking, you know what, what we'll see if you don't catch it here. I'm sure High Radius will be happy to tell you how the right technology can help you, right? You can predict payment behavior. You can actually relate, we can mitigate, we can avoid discounts. We can bring in the information on seasonal trends. So those are just things to think about, right? So as you look at, you might want to start at the high level or at the bottom up in terms of your variance, right? You might say, if we're longer range forecast, is it AR, AP, and then you want to dial down, okay, what is happening from AR? And some of this is also about communication, right? Especially on the sales side, if someone knows they're going to miss a payment or a late payment, but also in terms of COVID. So I think more conversations were being had. I think CFOs reaching out to customers. So you had to start understanding what that there was unpredictability because of COVID, and we had to bring some predictability in there. Well, the best way to do that, right, is to speak to the customers. Is COVID going to impact you? How is it going to impact you? And so sometimes you can be hit a little bit off guard, but always realize that there's a way, right, to mitigate that unpredictability. And you can also, get out in front. And so those who reached out to their customers, I bet their forecast variances were a lot lower than those who waited 30, 60, 90 days. So that's why you also have to have an environment of continuous improvement, unpredictability, and AP, right? We can have, that can be to payment terms, payment methods. I love to talk about checks now because they're not evil, by the way. That's a webinar in a couple weeks. But how you're paid, right? Working capital thresholds. Sometimes, actually, if you have an AP portal, that can help with your predictability and your discounts and rebates too as well. So at the end of the day, what technology allows us to do, if done right, is it allows us to we have visibility, right, into how we're paid, why we're paid, how we're making payments, why we're making payments, and then we take that information and we improve supplier relationships, we improve customer relationships. Guess what? That gives us control of how and when we're paid and how and when we make payments. Guess what that does? It brings predictability into the why. When I used to be in treasury, we'd always look at the bank balance, the bank balance, the bank balance. That doesn't tell me the why. Having visibility and understanding the dynamics of AP and AR and other things that are causing my variance, that's what's important. And so the shift towards understanding, right, the behavior of our suppliers and customers, and AI can help us do that and also help us manage those relationships. That's what's really driving this paradigm shift in the value of cash forecasting and how good we can get at it. So demystifying AP and AR. So everyone likes to keep it simple, right? People, process, and technology. Tracy, if I'm speaking over your slides, let me know. I'm on a roll here. So
Nope, we're still on track.
okay, cool. All right. So process, right, on the AR side. Some of the stuff you're like, yeah, I know this is pretty simple, but it helps to look at these things. People that are involved, right, in treasury, they should all understand these things, right? Especially the cash forecasting person. You need to understand the dynamics. And so if there's a variance, you could say, where is it coming from? Or how about you add value across the enterprise, right? What's our cost of AR, right? So credit, sales, invoicing helps you understand all the mechanics and where you need the visibility, right? What do we really care about? Collections, right? We want collections, right? We don't want deductions, we want collections. And then on the bottom part here, it just shows that these should not be managed in silos. And so that's why this integrated receivables platform that HighRadius has is so important. Again, this may be review, but it's more on the backside. I will allow you to get the slides, so let me know if you want those. And some of these things might just be good for your team, right, to go over, your treasury, your CFO, your AP and AR. So when people understand the mechanics and the impact that they have on cash forecasting accuracy, but also the value that it has, it's important. So again, just for the people, right, you guys know these things, we need to assign, revise, and manage. You look at the parties, and then I know Tracy's mind start to think, man, AI has done a really good job in helping us with these credit limits. Credit reporting and metrics, extremely important. We need to create reports that are relative to our report customers. I've done a lot of webinars on this with HighRadius. They have a fantastic, some fantastic thought leadership about how to understand your customers of the reporting and give them a dashboard that matters. And then we got to think about our approvers as well, right? our directors, procurement, whatever, AR manager, controller, treasury manager. And then on the technology side, right? Again, what this really speaks to is just kind of the challenges, and what we really want is a solution, right? That allows us to be more efficient, right? In terms of Cash App, we need remittances. We have to get it. We have to be able to process them from multiple sources. Cash App. Oh, what am I going to tell you? When I was at Franklin Electric, it took my person 2 weeks to apply one wire of like $3 million. Your credit, it helps you evaluate credit worthiness through credit scoring and apply a model to that. Your collections, this is really, really, really important. And this is where AI and AR was really fascinating to me. It gives you insights into how to communicate with your customers, why to communicate with your customers instead of the same dunning strategy. And then deductions is just a time wasting endeavor, right? Usually. So if we have disputes, why do we have them every single month? Right? How do we align on those? How do we give visibility into the customers and our team so we can mitigate those? And so that's on the technology side. And then, sorry, I'm in the weeds. Arnie likes to be in the weeds. The process side, AP, again, it just shows you everything that's involved in the process: capture code send, verify and approve, authorize for payment. You might need to send it to a financial system, and you want that audit. Everyone's like, yes, Ernie, I know you have a lot of AP webinars, so that's it. But that's just the process. So I want you to be thinking about, right, this is what's causing my variance. How do I understand that? Let's start at people, process, and technology and say, okay, the more that I know about these things, how is it going to help me remove the unpredictability in these areas that's driving my forecast variance? Again, on the AP side, we have procurement, we have AP, all these different tasks. In treasury, we are approvers. Oh, so painful, right? What about the other approvers, the managers? And so those things can also have an impact, because if we have a slower cycle time, right, the faster that we can turn things around, the more predictability we're going to have, right? And if we can control that, if we know we're going to pay, we should be able to forecast we're going to pay this on this day. Take control of that. As you take control, especially you don't want to miss discount opportunities. You take control of, when the payments are going out, right? Someone's just not deciding willy-nilly. Why are you making payments at a certain time? Why are you using this, right? Why are your customers doing this? What can we do? You can take control, but it's all about those relationships and communication. And in terms of technology, I worked on this with one of my other strategic partners who's on the AP side. I love this. On the AP side, what you really want is not COVID, but the COVID things to look for: collaborative, online access, visibility. You need to enable intelligence and diligence on your controls, and I think this probably goes across the technology stack there. So just giving you a little bit more insights. Now we're going to shift to some of our 10 tips specifically for better cash forecasting, and I think I'm going to let Tracy back in the game here. So Tracy, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Ernie. So the first tip is that before you start cash forecasting, or before you try to make any attempts to improve it or make it better, you first need to understand the purpose of your forecast. Why are you even bothering to do it? And whether or not you're in cash surplus or cash deficit is going to have a big impact on the reason why you forecast. Now, even though it says 2 types of companies in the world, really you might be anywhere along. Think of that as a continuum. And so you might be far in cash surplus, or just slightly in cash surplus, or far in deficit, or maybe slightly in deficit. But whichever way it is, it's going to impact the approach you take to your forecast. So I just talked to a company today who says, we've got so much cash, I'm not sure there's really any benefit to us improving accuracy. Well, that might very well be. So let's not spend time on that. What can we make better? Is it that you want to maybe automate the process and not have so many people involved? So understanding that is a really important factor. 2 is mapping your process in detail, understanding all of your key categories, and that might be AP, AR, it might be some financial instruments, it might be payroll, Capex, taxes. Those tend to be the biggest categories that most companies have. And then thinking about what is unique about your company. So maybe there's some other category that you really need to think about because it is unique to your company. So figure out your process for each one of these different categories and what's the best source of the data. How should you be getting it? How accurately can it be forecasted? Then understanding the drivers of accuracy. We've talked about some of these a bit, but think about the volatility that's involved with the different types of things that you have. And that should say how often you need to reforecast, how often you need to bring in new information, compare it to actuals, and then reforecast it based on what you've learned. But this varies by company. And so you really have to think about what applies to your company. The next one is understanding the data that you need versus the data that you have. So what data are you using? Where are you getting it from? Are you getting it straight from the source? Are you able to get it from AR or AP, or do you need someone to do it for you? If you have country controllers all around the world and they're contributing information, or is it that you are the key person who's putting it together for the global forecast? So really thinking about how are you centralized or decentralized? What are the best sources of data? How can you eliminate subjectivity and instead make it more objective? Turn this art into more of a science. And so by figuring out what are the best sources of the data, the different pieces that you need, you can then figure out how to get it. Is it something that you can connect to directly? Can you run a report, or can you do it yourself, or are you dependent on somebody else? Can you extract the data? Is it available through API? So many different options and things you can think about, but it all starts with the data. So next, you've got to, of course, understand what barriers there might be to doing a forecast well. So first, is your forecast accurate enough, and are you getting it in a timely enough manner to actually be able to use the forecast that you get? One company told me that their FP&A group is actually creating most of the cash forecast, but by the time they put it together, it's already 2 weeks old when they get it. So it's not, that's not actionable. You need an accurate forecast that can be created quickly so that you can then see that information and start making some decisions about it. So the things that are barriers and kind of make it difficult is that it might be hard to get to the data. You might not get it in a timely fashion, especially if you're depending on other people not in your organization to do it. Your organization might be very complex. Maybe it really does require a whole lot of different people to pull together all the right things. Maybe other company or other departments don't understand its importance to you. And therefore, it's a low priority item, and they don't care whether or not they give you something that's accurate and timely or not. And so, being able to communicate these things can really make a difference as well. So once you have these barriers identified, then you can start figuring out how do you plug the gap? How can you make a difference? And technology is often the thing that will make the difference here. So how can technology make a difference? Well, these days you've been hearing a whole lot of acronyms, and I imagine you know what these are by now. APIs, RPA, AI, data lakes, and BIs or dashboards. Essentially, API is the ability to quickly and easily exchange information between systems, where usually even on demand. So with banks, if you think about APIs, it's that banks are finally realizing that you should own your own data and have access to it anytime you want. And by open banking and making APIs available, it's essentially giving you a pathway to the bank to grab your data anytime you want it. And that applies not just with banks, but any kind of systems. RPA is robotic process automation. It's basically saying if you're doing something repetitive, is that something that can be automated? Can I make what we used to just say a macro, but now we would say a bot? Can a bot do it? Can it go through the steps and replicate what needs to be done? AI is more sophisticated. It's implying that there's some element of thinking. It's not always the same results. Even though the circumstances might be the same, but you might get a different result based on all the information that's available. And so that's what's really making the difference today in the ability to produce a more accurate forecast. Data lake is what's often necessary to pull together all of the right pieces of data. So much data can be involved in building a good forecast. Even if you think about all the invoices your company might issue in a week or in a month, it might be hundreds or thousands. So how can you get that data, have it in a place that can handle large amounts of data, and sometimes even unstructured data that isn't easy to map together or to join tables together. That's what a data lake can provide, a place to have all this information upon which you can use things like dashboards and BI tools, business intelligence tools, ways of visualizing and pulling that data in a way that is meaningful, that makes sense, so that it's actionable, not just data. So those are kind of the technologies that you'll see a lot of and hear more and more about in this year and in the next year. Ernie, why don't you take us through a few more?
All right, thanks, Tracy. Let me just rewind a little bit because this is I work with high radius on this slide. This is one of my favorite slides, and what I always tell people, right? You have a project in cash forecasting, right? This is where you're at, right? And then you decide where do you want to go, right? So some of you, if you've not been doing this all that long, you see where you're at and where you need to go, and it looks like Mount Everest, and you're like, wow, am I ever going to climb that mountain? Before you start trying to climb the mountain with technology, you want to see how you can lower it, right? Make the climb shorter. So what if I improve data? What if we had better communication? What if we had standardized process? What if I just took the technology I already had and had a better understanding of cash flows? What if we collaborated more effectively? Now those things might take time, but not cost. And then instead of looking up at Mount Everest, you're going up maybe, 10 feet or so. And so I always like to say that look at your inherent barriers, right? This is where you are. This is where you want to get to before we start, trying to get the money out the door. Let's make sure that we mitigate all the things that we have control and influence over. And that's going to make our journey we're going to be able to make it, right? And we're going to be able to do it cost effectively. So I just wanted to kind of throw that. And also what Tracy just went through about the technology stack, that was incredible. If I was on this webinar, that's the recording and I just listened to that. And so if anyone feels kind of overwhelmed about these terms, right? Why am I hearing all these terms? What do they need? Maybe you need to get your treasury analysts up to speed in 3 minutes, right? API, RPA, AI, data lake. I would recommend that you give them a listen to what Tracy just said. So thank you so much, Tracy. This is one of my many things I preach about. Visibility. You got to have visibility into processes, suppliers, and customer activities. This helps us understand the why. Understanding the why creates predictability and helps mitigate that variance. Accounts payable, right? Do I have visibility into that? Does everyone that needs to see, do we have 360 visibility? Accounts receivable, Tracy mentioned FP&A activities, anything that can impact cash movements and why, as we understand those. I mentioned earlier, for me, some of my variance was from communication. I wasn't in the know. So how do you get yourself in the know? And maybe you need to let the C-suite know, by the way, I did this when I did that FX transaction. I said, me being in the know just cost us about $10,000. What do you think about that, right? That's off the bottom line. So those are things that are important. And then of course, accountability is important. And I think with the data that we have, I think we want to do that bottom up forecast and when that makes sense. And so having that accountability is incredible based on the cash flow drivers, right? So if you identify, hey, AR is my area. Okay, who controls it? How do I get the information? Who controls the quality when I get it, right? How do I create some metrics or incentives around them to do better? But I think at the end of the day, you want all these things, right? We want to understand AP and AR. So those are the people that provide it, the owners and the programming leads. So we need to get all these folks in alignment, and you should have a meeting. Food always works, right? Get these people in the room, show them the impacts of what they're doing, the importance of it, and also show them the value. And Tracy will take us through that shortly. And that to me is my favorite part of the presentation, because when I was a practitioner, I was always like, I'm going to improve cash forecasting, and I get the so what. And so being able to quantify that is incredible and helps you make the business case really easily. And then you want to harmonize your cash forecasting procedures and systems. Tracy mentioned this. So what I like, what I've heard is we used to use centralized. I like the word harmonize. To me, centralized meant corporate thinks they know everything, or FP&A thinks they know better than us how to do cash forecasting. So they're going to tell us how to do it. Harmonizing means if you don't have a standard process, right, figure out who's doing it best and why they're doing it the best, and take the best of the best. So take the best of the best in terms of gathering, modeling, and variance analysis, and even reporting, and let's standardize across best practice, not just push that down because we're corporate and everyone needs to listen to us. So that's incredibly important. And then I think this is all, they're all important. This is one of the most important ones for me. You have to have a mindset of continuous improvement. Why is this important? Monitor time allocation. You should be tracking how much time you're spending on cash forecasting, how much is spent, right? Gathering data, using data quality, how much is really done on analysis. You need to maximize that time. Mitigate non-value add activities. That's what automation and AI lets us do. We want to have accountability, the right incentives, right employee experience. All of these we can always be doing better at, and that helps us create this mindset of continuous improvement. Now, I think everyone is like so upset that I'm gonna not ask another polling question, so I think I'll go ahead and sneak one in there. People are probably worried they missed a polling question. They're not going to get their CTP credits. So, all right. So asking you, has your company considered automating your cash forecast? Maybe it's yes, you're just starting. Yes, you're currently evaluating. I didn't know this was possible. I don't know. So actually, if you're already doing it, just go ahead and select B for me. That was a poorly worded poll question. That's my fault. Or you don't know, perfectly fine. Anyone interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar? Again, you'll have to answer all of our polling question. Really love everyone to take a few seconds, push the button, right? Help us see. We really want to understand where you're at. We want to speak to everyone on the audience, not just our enterprise companies or our small companies or our mid companies. We want to speak to everyone and give you relevant information, make you think and take an action. So let me go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds, and then we're going to take a quick peek at the result here, and then we'll share. All right, so again, I apologize for not having you already doing it. The good news is everybody needs to talk to High Radius after the webinar, because we have 42%. You don't know, you know what you need to do. Find out. You're currently evaluating solution providers, right? You should definitely put the leaders in there, right? High Radius in the mix for you. And then 21%, you're just starting the discovery phase. Make sure that you've educated yourself. And also you have to think about it in where am I at, but where am I going as your company is going to grow? Are you going to go across borders? Are you going to make acquisitions? Are you going to expand your supply chain? You want to be ready for that complexity. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to answer that one. And so, Tracy, we got some work to do on educating folks about the value of the automation of ROI. So I'm going to let you do that for us.
Sure. So as kind of where we started, which is that there's finally some real change in the area of cash forecasting. It's been an issue for a long time, and there's been a little bit of automation available, particularly with like treasury management systems. But ultimately, we're finding that even with the TMS, most companies still use Excel. So what is it new that we're bringing to cash forecasting, and does it have a real ROI? Is it something that you can justify internally? And what we're bringing is an automated tool that can literally pull data from a wide variety of different sources, provide a forecast to you, or allow you to do some kind of self-service forecasting as well, provide a tool that will do some automated variance analysis so that you can really figure out what things need to change and how they can be improved. So with that as kind of the backdrop of what's available, a tool to help with automation and accuracy, how does that translate into ROI? And basically, it comes in a few different ways. So a subscription to software today is almost all cloud-based, which means that price-wise, it's a subscription. You're going to be paying some type of annual fee. There's usually some type of setup or implementation of required. That's kind of a one-time fee. So when we think about what the ROI is, then it's going to be the value you get from it, the benefits, minus that annual operating expense, that subscription, minus that one-time expense, which might very well come out of the Capex budget. So let's look at these a little bit more closely. If we go to looking at the gross savings, savings is made up in three areas. Automation, the time savings that you get. So if you really begin to quantify what can be automated versus what still happens manually, and put that in terms of the people that are doing it and the hours they're spending doing it, you can literally calculate that. Now, I won't say it's a hard dollar savings. It's kind of soft. Chances are you're not trying to fire anybody. We're not trying to help anyone lose their job. Instead, they'll just reallocate their time to other things. When I worked in Treasury, I always had a long things to do list, and some of those things on the bottom of the list I just never would get to. So maybe this is the tool that's going to help you get to the bottom of your list, implement some of the other ideas that you've had. So if you can free up some time, that's going to help you. It has a value, and you have to count that value, even though it's technically not a hard dollar savings. The other two, though, are hard dollar savings. An increase in interest expense or a decrease in interest, I'm sorry, increase in interest income or decrease in interest expense. And that comes by not just improving, don't think about the forecast in terms of overall accuracy. Think of it as a decrease in variances. If you were able to decrease your average variance on your forecast, you wouldn't have as many wild swings to the left nor to the right. That means that you won't overborrow to compensate for things that might happen. You're not going to underborrow or maybe leave money unutilized, worrying about what might happen, trying to cover those ends of the scale of having wild variances. So if you're able to narrow those variances, there's no need to hold as much idle cash. Your cash buffer doesn't need to be as big. Your target balances don't need to be as big. So if you can pay down more debt sooner, or you can borrow less in the first place and not over hard dollar savings.
Yeah, Tracy, let me jump in here because I think there's even more here, right? From my perspective, so you have to think about everything that gets impacted, right? So I mentioned before, right? It might save us money on how we're allocating our funds, right? Are we making FX transactions? So if I would have known this, right, I would have been more efficient, right, in the amount I borrowed, and I guess you can say it's interest income in some sense, but what I spent, right? So this is great, but if you think about it, even you can go down another level, I think, and look at everything, how much cash I have in and going out, what are the things that impacts, what are the decisions? And I think as your company becomes more complex, maybe it helps you optimize your capital structure, maybe you're moving money and your intercompany transfer. So sorry to jump in there, but I just think my brain just went, wow, there's even more there to look at.
That's very true, Ernie. It's just hard to quantify some of those, but
Yeah,
there's a whole lot of soft savings that you can. It's not always easy to include kind of that what if scenario
right.
in your ROI, but you can talk about just bigger benefits that you know have value. And you're right, Ernie. And maybe by having a better forecast, you'll see that you're able to repatriate more money
Right.
and
Yeah.
therefore deploy it better. So every time you can deploy cash better, however you're doing that, there's some value in that. There's some real cost benefit to that. And you've got to figure out what it is. When you're thinking about the automation savings, literally think about all the tasks that are involved in putting together your forecast. And then of those, what percentage of that task can be automated? As a vendor in this space, we have a good idea and are able to help our customers know what the average benefit is that our clients see. About how much of a task is likely to be fully automated, some partially automated, some maybe not automated at all. There's still certain tasks that you might have to do, and help figure out exactly what is that cost savings in hours. Those hours can be, of course, multiplied by the value of each FTE and the cost of each FTE for the hours that are saved. Now, similarly, you can calculate that interest income or decrease in interest expense just the way I talked about, reduced buffers. Maybe if you're on the cash surplus side, you're able just to invest more. We know that there's investment rates are very, very low, but every dollar matters and rates aren't going to be this low forever. So imagine that you're able to get your forecast better now so that when rates go up, you're able to better take advantage of it. So if you add those together, you'll be able to get a good ROI. And this is just an example here that you'll be able to go to. I know our time is getting low, so I won't spend too much time on it. Big businesses and smaller businesses often see different types of ROI. Big businesses usually are seeing more ROI as a result of a borrowing advantage. They're dealing in bigger numbers, and so it translates to a real hard dollar amount. While smaller businesses, especially if they've got a wide variety of people involved, that FTE reallocation might very well make a difference. Or maybe it is all around investment. So it really can vary depending on the nature of your business. But just know that the size of your business really doesn't matter. More than likely, you're going to be able to come up with a positive ROI. And don't forget, there's always the intangible. And the intangible is confidence. If you had a more accurate ROI, would your CFO feel better about the numbers that you give to him or her? When you predict quarter ending cash and you're able to do it far in advance of the end of the quarter, when they still have the time to pull those levers to help steer cash where they want it to go, does that have a value? It's not something you can quantify, but I'll tell you that's the number one thing that most CFOs want, especially of public companies. So there is value, and it's value that can help you both from a career perspective as well, of course, from just the ROI of getting a project approved.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up, put a fine point on the bottom line. I'm going to go ahead and launch our polling question, make sure we have time for that. So the bottom line, right, cash forecasting is incredibly important. We showed that, right, from the CFO, right, all the way up to the CFO, all the way to what's been going on. We need to understand that predictability. And so what's the bottom line for success? Success is mitigating that variance to the point where it no longer where the variance no longer impacts your decision. So if the accuracy needs 80%, all right, let's get you to 80%, right? You need to clearly define the goals of your forecast, understand your data. You need to understand, right, and capitalize on understanding of the impacts of cost and revenues. And we need to take more control of our cash movements. That's done through better relationships with our suppliers and customers. Of course, let's get down to the main focus. You need to identify the drivers of your cash forecasting accuracy, be able to know when those change. You need to understand the drivers of your forecasting accuracy. You want to manage the drivers. And then Tracy did a great job. You can build the business case, right, for your forecasting accuracy, and you can sell that as well. And then you need to invest in the right technology and the right solution partner. Incredibly important. I'm going to leave the polling question up just a few more seconds for my CTP folks. All right, let's go ahead. Thank you so much. And so I think I really love this webinar, and I always enjoy speaking with Tracy. It's so exciting to see that things are changing in our space, right, Tracy? I think we've had the same forecasting presentation for about 20 years now. So just real quickly, go to treasurywebinars.com. We have a lot of webinars coming up. I'm doing a how to master a virtual interview, incredibly important. We have some new topics: supply chain automation, social CFO, leading beyond and across the enterprise. I want to thank Tracy for joining me today. Always a pleasure, Tracy. I always enjoy your
Thank you so much,
insights.
Ernie.
And also want to thank High Radius, amazing commitment to thought leadership. Please go visit their website, amazing resources. And finally, to each and every one of you out there, thank you to your friends and family who are out on the front lines of COVID every single day for us. We sincerely appreciate that. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, everyone, make the rest of your day great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.